We are live on YouTube. And there we go. We are live on YouTube. All right, cool. Now we are good to go, and we are going to start.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-host and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on our live shows.
Broadcast for shooters, hunters, and gun enthusiasts. This is the Firearms Radio Network. The bandwidth for this episode of This Week in Guns is sponsored by Patriot Patch Company. PatriotPatch.co.
Welcome to This Week in Guns. This show is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and Patriot Patch Company.
And this show offers commentary on the latest firearms industry news, information, and buzz. I'm your host, Shawn Heron, and it is my pleasure to introduce our guest tonight. I was told ladies first. So first up, we've got owner and chief instructor of Elite Firearms and Training and host of the Gun Funny podcast, Ava Flannell. Welcome to This Week in Guns.
Thank you.
Next up, we've got firearms educator, national director of training for A Girl and a Gun, director of training at Hell's Gun Shop, COO of Gap Marketing, and host of Trigger Time TV, Tatiana Whitlock. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. You got my first name right, and you bumbled the last one. You were so.
I know. Can you believe that? Can you believe it? Next up, we've got historical firearms researcher and host of C&R Arsenal's Primer Small Arms of World War I series, Othias McCarthy. Welcome to the show.
Howdy, I'm actually here. Look.
You're here in the studio.
I'm alive, all of you. I just sent out a message to tell my people that I'm on here. So I'm
okay.
alive. I made it. Look.
He's alive, and he's kicking. And by that, I mean stinking a little bit. You should have showered first.
Yeah, I was soaked in rain for the past 4 hours.
And then he drove for like another 9, and I have to sit next to him.
It's good.
That's great.
I got a strong presence.
Good times for all. All right. So first up, I'm going to talk about our advertisers, the Patriot Patch Company. Check them out, patriotpatch.co, and Manticore Arms. Thank them. Go to manticorearms.com. Use coupon code TWG10. But more importantly, let's go to the Bullpup Shoot next month, September 15th, 2018, at the site training in Mount Carroll, Illinois. Find out all the details at bullpupshoot.com. We'll be there. It's going to be a blast, and it always is, and we hope to see you there. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Georgia campus carry stands challenge to the law is actually rejected. So there was a bunch of professors that, they were uncomfortable with this, a glass blowing professor and environmental literacy and things like that. They were just uncomfortable, and they came up with a bunch of reasons why campus carry is a terrible idea and people shouldn't be able to defend their lives on campus, and judge rejected it, which I think is a great thing. Anyone have any opinions about this one?
The first thing that comes to mind though is you happen to mention that it was a glass blowing professor.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, is he threatened often by his students? Like, is that a thing where you end up in a lot of arguments with students? Or
it's funny because the article actually mentions that quote unquote he gives open critiques of her students' efforts, which are sometimes not well received.
Right. Well, then they're standing there with potentially broken sharp glass. Like they could do a lot of damage just at any moment.
No joke. A glass studio is a very dangerous place. There's fire. There's molten stuff. I'm a graduate of Rhode Island School of Design, so the whole fine art environment I'm very familiar with. Those critiques can get vicious. I am not kidding. I mean, you question your core being, the very essence of your existence on earth in these critiques. It's brutal stuff. But the idea of those critiques is to harden your soul, not to destroy you. You've got to be able to grow a pair through those critiques and level up and be able to communicate your ideas more eloquently and succinctly and defend your rationale and thoughts. So, maybe they're not holding those critiques quite properly. It's not a safe space. A critique is meant to be rough. That's what they're for. And a teacher leading it should know that. You're not there to pat your students on the back in those.
Very interesting. Another philosophy professor covers hot button topics such as race, sexuality, and gender, has moved to a policy since campus carry has taken effect to allow students to leave class whenever they feel unsafe, no longer even requiring attendance.
Ridiculous.
Dang.
I feel like a lot of people feel unsafe on like Friday.
Yeah.
Or Monday morning.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Mondays just feel really unsafe to me. I mean, that's, I just don't want to come in when the potential shooter is fresh. I'd rather them shoot at me on a Wednesday.
Yeah, I don't even. And then a biology professor stated concerns over guns in his laboratory alongside $100,000 worth of equipment, biohazards, hydrogen, and radioisotopes. And I just have to wonder, what do they think is going to go on? Like these concealed carriers are just going to like go insane and start shooting up tanks. And
well, to give them the benefit of the doubt, I think the thing that if they are sincere in their concern, then they must be concerned about negligence. Because if they're concerned about, malicious intent, then that's a moot point, because they're going to just carry those guns in there anyway. I think you have to know that a sign does not stop a determined person. That's why these shootings happen.
Yeah.
Like they're not happening in places that were unprotected by signs. There was 100% magic sign protection at every one of the shootings. Well, I think there might be like one exception, but like, for the most part, they're happening where the signs are already up and we already say, no, don't do that. So what they're afraid of now is that there's going to be guns present by responsible people who do not mean to harm, who are going to do accidental harm. That's their new fear, which is not impossible. We saw a backflip guy.
Yeah.
But it's also so far outside. Like the accidents are probably as rare as the shootings themselves, and they're much less dangerous. I mean, an accidental discharge versus somebody intentionally trying to harm multiple people.
Yeah.
It's radically different, even if they happened at remotely the same rate, or, it's just one of those things where it's like, if this is really your concern, then maybe it's time to say, if we're going to have this policy, I would like to see, education on firearms in our schools. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're afraid of negligence, we have a solution for that. It's called education. I would think that they would know that.
Every single one of these, I don't think it's negligence. They're afraid of people acting out and doing things. A geography professor said that they talk about topics like climate change, and that they get into heated debates with students occasionally, air quotes, acting out. And I guess that they must feel truly like to go from zero to mass murder is just something that happens, when you spill your coffee or something.
Well, to be fair, I think for some people, for the people who are going to do this, they are broken in some way. But I think what they're missing out on is the fact that nothing about the current policy encourages those people to bring guns and somehow magically get away with it. You know what I mean? It's like those people would already do it. Like they're already under that risk. They're already upsetting students. Those students are already capable of carrying a firearm and buying a firearm. I think the problem is the policy makes them aware of their vulnerability in a way that they were not aware of it before. And so you and I might be aware of our vulnerabilities and choose to conceal carry. By the way, thank you, Colorado, for not having reciprocity with South Carolina as like the one blind spot in my trip.
I was just looking at that today, and it's South Carolina's fault, not our fault.
Yeah, I know. It's anyway. I had a nice trip up until that line, but no, it's just one of those things where it's like you say, I find that I might be vulnerable to this situation. And so you can put the onus on yourself to resolve that and be prepared for it, or you can put it on everyone else to take care of your one fear. And so I think that what's happening here is it's like, well, we need a policy that protects me from this one thing that I'm irrationally afraid of, but there's not really a real solution to this. There's not a way other than metal detectors and body searches every time those students come in. There's not a solution for this, but they think they have one.
Yeah.
They think that they can just sort of shame students into not killing. And it's like, no, that shame is not what works on these people, or they would have never done this to begin with.
And, concealed carry on a lot of campuses exists in a lot of places. And as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any incidents whatsoever, whether negligence or just flat out evil.
To be fair, if you want to argue against concealed carry on campuses on the basis of negligence, I think that's a potentially solid ground to have a conversation on that I would disagree with, but I'm not going to say, you're just projecting or you're just making this personal. I'd say, okay, that's your fear. Let's talk about how we make that, much less likely. Let's mitigate that. But
well, I think.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that the bigger conversation here is that we have educators who are uneducated on a subject leading the pack in legislation. And that's a concern. That's a bigger concern. I look at a lot of the youth that I work with, the young people that I work with, they're quite impressive on maturity and their ability to come into a range with their parent and go through a full 8-hour program. They're 6 and 7 years old. And we underestimate the capabilities of our young people. We're kind of educating them out of the capability of being personally responsible by allowing this type of legislation to carry forward. College is supposed to be the place that we craft and we refine adults, not that we turn them into more irresponsible in the sense that they've deferred their responsibility to other people to dictate their own personal actions. So we assume that these young people are incompetent and we treat them like they are, but they're the next set of leaders. So the fact that our educators are dumbing them down is really frustrating because they are capable of greatness. I mean, we are Americans. We have access to the biggest knowledge base of anyone in the world, and we turn out some of the most incredibly intelligent people. Let's start allowing them to be onus to do those. Our educators continue to push them down and tell them, no, you can't be responsible, you can't be competent, you can't be safe. That's a problem. You know, when those individuals who feel that they want to impose those additional types of issues come into play, you know, if they were to be required to go through a gun safety program themselves with a reputable outfit, I think we may change some minds. So before we go imposing, let's educate those individuals a little bit more.
Well put.
Yeah, I agree strongly with that, mostly because I have been saying, and I was in an argument last night where I say that I feel like we're infantilizing what are supposed to be adults 18 through 20. And like they've become, it's sort of an extended high school experience, but now it's almost like a daycare where it's like you need to stay in the dorm, you need to eat at the food services. I was talking about, I live in downtown Charleston for a long time, and I also stayed involved with the college after I graduated. And my experience was that, you know, half the people I knew had cars, and those that did not at least had a bicycle. And then within 8 years, you couldn't get the kids to have a bicycle because why bother? I'd have to put it somewhere and lock it and occasionally oil it. That's just too much for me. I'd rather just go only to the cafeteria, only to class, only to dorm, and nothing else in this beautiful historic city. They would never go out for lunch. And they had money. It's not like it was just saving money. They just did not want to leave campus because it was an inconvenience to them. And, you know, that's how they've been handled their whole lives, is that there was no need to strive. And then the other thing I noticed is a lot of those people were deeply discontent, because I honestly think sort of just going through a little regular suffering, not like, you know, pain, but like actually having to flex your muscles, flex your mind, achieve something. I think it pays off for people emotionally.
Yeah, totally agree. Next story, guys, comes to us from Washington. Washington I-639 ballot measure gets tossed. So this is kind of a funny one. There was a sweeping anti-gun legislation that was being proposed in a ballot measure. They got several 100,000 signatures, and the judge threw it out because they didn't follow any of the rules, which I know is hugely surprising to all of us. They printed the text too small so people couldn't even read it. And the judge says, and I quote, "I have 20/20 vision. I can't read it." Moreover, it's not a true copy. It is a correct copy of the proposed. It's not a correct copy of the proposed measure.
Yeah, I was going to say it's like a 5-point font or something. It was ridiculous.
No, I can't speak. Editorialized or something.
Yeah, I mean, just the whole thing was basically done incorrectly. They have very specific laws and rules that they were supposed to follow, and they followed none of them. And you know that tricks a lot of people. They have the people that come up to them and say, "Hey, do you want to sign this petition?" And they say, "Well, what is it?" And they say, "Oh, well, here's 30 pages or whatever it happens to be," which is what it was.
And then they rattle off some like, "Well, it's basically this."
Yeah.
And I mean, you saw where they did a thing where some comedian was like, "End women's suffrage," and however many people signed it because it just sounded right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
And basically this law wanted to regulate all semi-automatic long arms other than shotguns.
Oh, I can definitely. I could see how having the conversation on the street, they would absolutely steer that to sound like something.
Well, I mean, they labeled it assault rifle.
Yeah,
it was probably already controlled. Yeah, assault rifle. So it would have been an already controlled object. And they're like, "We need to control this," and it's like,
Tatiana, any thoughts on this one?
Oh man, I get that all the time up here in Maine because we're constantly dealing with special interest groups, largely funded from folks from New York, coming up to try and petition their way into changing the Maine gun culture, because Maine is incredibly pro-gun right now, but we're dancing on that slippery slope of flipping the other way, like many New England states have, because we're just not a very wealthy state where the population that is pro-gun can combat those special interests, huge wealth of money that comes in. And so I've seen everything from people literally getting paid in front of me to go and hand stuff out, you know, to people trying to convince me what is a full semi-auto Glock and what is not, and why my children are unsafe living in the state of Maine. I've heard everything. Yeah. And I've seen all kinds of ridiculousness. It blows my mind. It's really upsetting. And the other part that's hard to watch are these young people who are getting baited into participating into this. That's really, really hard for me to see, because I look at them and I go, you are being exploited with incorrect information. And that's criminal. That's hard to see.
I hate signing petitions personally, but every now and then I'll stop and I'm the irritating guy that wants to read the whole thing and doesn't listen to their spiel at all. Ava's seen it. And I actually did sign one and refused to sign the other, and he got annoyed, but like, I don't really care. And I truly hate signing petitions. Just every once in a while I get caught up and I'm like, yeah, that's something that I know about and I can believe in. But I think the whole petition process is kind of broken just because it is so easily manipulatable. They can say whatever they want.
The good news is that we have the White House petition system or whatever that's completely ignored.
Oh, yeah.
So now people can waste their time on that one instead of actually organizing. Like, you can feel good and go to bed and have accomplished absolutely nothing by going to the actual government website. And it's wonderful because now politicians don't have to respond to anything. They don't respond to that. And then it keeps you busy enough that you don't feel like you need to go actually write them a letter or get in their office or whatever. So yeah, it's a beautiful system. I mean, it's fantastic that they put that there. I'm so glad it's there now because now nothing can get done. That'll be great.
Totally.
I mean, nothing grassroots. If you have money and, partners in the government, yeah, okay, you can get something done. But, grassroots organizations, they're distracted now. We can get everything, pushed through easy.
Las Vegas officer takes down workplace shooter with a 50-yard shot. This comes to us from Blue Lives Matter. So, Ava, you were laughing earlier because this occurred at a place called?
It was Ross Dress for Less.
And they call that out specifically, the entire name.
Not
just Ross.
Every time?
Yeah. Ross Dress for Less. So employee got mad. He was the guy that greets you at the front. The what do they call
security.
them? Loss prevention.
Yeah.
Where was he working again?
Ross Dress for Less.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. If you want us to say that a few more times, let us know.
Yes, Ross Dress for Less.
We got to see if we can get you some more ad dollars.
Absolutely. I don't think Ross is going to. Maybe they will now, though. So he is the loss prevention guy at the front. Someone radios that a lady is going to bring her cart near the front door, and because she has an especially large load that she had purchased, and she's going to leave the car by the front door. He gets mad over the radio. The manager says, hey, why don't you go in the back room and we'll talk about this where we're not in front of customers. He gets very angry, threatens to kill her and another subordinate worker that are there, goes out to his car, gets a firearm, fires it into the air, walks back into the store, chases the lady around, shooting 9 rounds out of his 9mm firearm.
Actually, I think it was 16.
16. Oh, yeah, that's right. 16. And then he walks out. The cops come out. The cop gets out of his car, runs up, hides behind a palm tree, takes 5 shots, hits the guy in the hip, and then
wait, who hid behind the palm tree?
The cop.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we looked. It was a decent sized palm tree.
Yeah.
It wasn't,
I mean, we got
because I was like, oh, palm tree. Wow, way to take cover.
They can get pretty big.
Yeah, it was at least a foot.
They're also extremely good at stopping everything.
Exactly.
They are very resilient things.
Exactly. So the article says that the officer shot expertly, 5 rounds, striking the suspect once in his hip. To me, it looked good, looked great. And hopefully the guy was dressed in some Ross Dress for Less clothes because, he's going to need some new pants.
The interesting thing is they don't have their own product. They get, overages from the lots. So I was going to say maybe Ross could sponsor the police force, but the uniforms wouldn't match.
They wouldn't know.
I'm sorry, Ross Dress for Less.
Yes, thank you.
I'm very sorry.
We have to do the whole thing. But I mean, it was a good shoot. He found cover. He was taking time to line up his sights, and he hit the guy from a decent
50 yards.
Yeah. Was it 50 yards or 50 feet?
I thought it was 50 yards.
I think there is a video, and the video, I don't know.
No, 50-yard shot.
Dang. So
that's impressive.
Pretty dang good.
So I'm going to play devil's advocate for a moment.
All right.
Okay. I'm going to say that compared to our concerned teachers, that if this man did not have the ability to just leave his firearm in his car, then he would have had to go home to get it or done something else in which he may have cooled down. And so maybe he would not have shot up the Ross Dress for Less. But I will also now make my own counterpoint, which is that he would have shot something else up. Like the people who have this reaction are time bombs that are out there. And the only thing that's going to prevent them from acting out is immediate intervention when they do act out. So if there had been a concealed carrier, I find it highly likely he would have been stopped much quicker. Not that he didn't manage to kill anybody.
No.
Okay, good. But then, so if you want prevention, true prevention, it's going to be mental health services and identification of these issues earlier in life. And that's it. Those are your 2 options, is to halt the threat immediately when it started or predict the threat entirely. You cannot prevent people from being armed. It's not just a human right. It's a reality. There's something is a weapon around you all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
You know what kind of occurred to me is, so the guy, Muhammad, and I don't know, it doesn't say where he's from, but the supervisor was female. And I know in a lot of countries, like, women don't have that dominant presence. And I wonder if he just...
Oh, you think he may have taken like some sort of deeper cultural offense? Because it is odd that it's like a woman's going to leave this full cart here, and then for some reason that
he just
enrages
goes off
him.
yeah.
Like, I'm sure it must have been something that intervened with his sense of what his duty was at his job. But you can never know. I mean, there's no way, because it's always the story of why someone got mad. It's not like he's necessarily telling the story himself as to what was pushing him over. So they could probably just be like, well, we don't know. We just put the cart there. But who knows? They might have actually aggravated him. Who knows? So I wouldn't even count what was done to irritate him, because unless they shot at him first, he should not have shot back. So it's an irrational reaction no matter what.
Thoughts, Tatiana?
Yeah, of course. One, way to go. Kudos on making a 50-yard shot. How many people actually go and train with their pistol at 50 yards, let's be honest, on a regular basis? Most folks live within that 21-foot range, and then they call it good and call it a day, because that's kind of what we've been indoctrinated with. So 3 to 7 yards, everybody's a ninja. You start pushing it out to 10, it starts getting a little messy. 25, people start to melt down. And if you haven't actually worked out pistol skills at distance, really think that through, and what is an appropriate and responsible shot for you to take if that was you that got presented with that scenario. So fortunately, that officer was able to make a good hit. But as far as concealed carriers go, if I'm out there with my kids, I'm not engaging with the gun at 50 yards with my kids. My job is to keep them safe, get them in the car, get the cops on the phone, get first responders there fast. So, yes, concealed carriers can intervene and intercept a problem and shut it down in an expedient way, but it really is situationally dependent, and we've got to be honest about that when we look at these things. Fortunately, that officer was able to make a good hit, and the environment and conditions allowed him to make that shot where there wasn't stuff happening between him and the problem. But, if you're a person and it's what you're presented with right there in the moment, and you've got to respond, do it. But as a civilian, we are not obligated to throw ourselves into an environment that is live fire.
No, that's very fair. My assumption was based on the statement that he ran around the store firing the weapon.
Yeah, and then came out.
Endangered a lot of people. But definitely in a parking lot, I would be like, that's not.
And he fired at officers as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yep, definitely. And if you watch the video, like, this dude was dialed in. He made good shots. He braced his hands against the tree. I mean, it looked well practiced, which is definitely a good thing.
That's awesome.
Court orders New York congressman to surrender his gun while he is facing criminal charges. So this is, it's New York. So a New York congressman and staunch defender of the Second Amendment will surrender his guns after pleading not guilty to insider trading charges last week. It seems fairly clear that the insider trading occurred. He let his son know. His son sold a bunch of stock, and the next day the stock tanked. So probably pretty interesting, but doesn't look like it's a felony charge or anything like that. But New York definitely disarming.
Mm-hmm.
That's odd. So not felony and not a violent act.
No.
Yeah.
So what is the reason?
Just because that is the way that New York works.
That to me is very bizarre.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
As a matter of fact, I have a problem with like taking gun rights away for felonies that are non-violent, and it's because there's so many things. Like the only indicator for violent, like the only indicator of misuse of a firearm, like murder, the only indicator is previous violence.
Mm-hmm.
And so like theft does not indicate that you will murder someone. Like, I mean, animal abuse, but that's violence. You know what I mean? But there's nothing else that really says this guy's going to be violent other than him being previously somewhat less violent.
Yeah, and I mean, this is obviously a guy. I mean, we see this kind of stuff in New York all the time. We saw it with John Napolitano, very, very non-violent, but basically had to get rid of all of his guns as well. We had him on Gun Funny on the Firearms Radio Network. And when you see stuff like this, it's just, once they start to take those rights and once they start to make you believe that firearms ownership and is a privilege and not a right, that's the slippery slope.
I think you nailed it. That's exactly what it feels like to me when they're like, well, we're going to take these away, even though there's no real legal reason to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You are treating it like a privilege. That seems extremely poor. I mean, we're talking about the Bill of Rights. Like, we're not talking about the Bill of you're allowed to do this.
And there's no due process.
No, there isn't.
There's no.
Maybe he'll be able to get his rights restored when he gets done. Maybe not. There's no real process to do so. Tatiana, have you dealt with anything kind of living up in the eastern side of the U.S.?
Just don't go to New York with guns.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
don't. Like we joke about being up in Maine that we live on an island called Maine. We've got the Atlantic, Canada, and occupied territory, which is all of the rest of New England. It kind of chokes us off from the rest of the country. But traveling in and out is tough, and New York is just very unfriendly and very restricting. But I have to say, it's like California. You know, the folks in New York and folks in California that are gun owners are fighting harder for their Second Amendment rights than anybody else. And, you know, we bash these states a lot. We really got to support them. You know, the firearms community needs to support the gun owners in those states, or they don't stand a chance. They need to know we're standing with them and we're behind them.
Yeah, and it's especially tough in this case because he is a 2A supporting politician in New York. So sucks that he, you know, committed a crime and he'll pay for that. But very interesting how New York works.
Yeah. By the way, when you talk about like a culture under siege for like Maine and things like that, I think a lot of the times, you know, we see a lot of things with Cal guns and things like that, and people go, look, it's California, it's lost. And I understand that you don't want to necessarily go drive to California and personally protest for the Californians, but I will say that if you're in the U.S. and you believe that, you know, the Bill of Rights is a federal power, because I'm kind of a states' rights person, but there are things that are federal, and there's 10 things that are federal, and well, the 10th one is this goes to the state. But so there's 9 things that are federally guaranteed, and yet they're not being federally guaranteed. It's weird how I have to hear that this is a federal law, even though it should be a states' right issue all the time. And yet this is very clearly black and white, something that should be guaranteed by the federal government, no matter what the state says. And it's not. And so you should be, even if your state is safe, you should be offended by that, I think, because even though it's not you that is affected, another American citizen is losing what is a federally granted right. A human right. Like I don't hear people say that even on our side. I don't hear people often say the Second Amendment is a human right. It's a human rights violation, and it sounds like you're being, you know, sort of, even on our side we do this thing where it's like, well, that's a gross over, because it sounds like you're actually like torturing someone or something like that. But it is a human right. Like it's the same thing as condemning free speech. It's the same thing as like illegal search and seizure or illegal detention. You know. It's a human right. And so when I hear that Maine has problems with that, I sympathize completely, instead of thinking, well, that's Maine's problem, because I'm going, well, there's Americans who are losing their rights because someone else feels like they're better than them. That's not good. And I think Colorado, I just got here, but you guys, don't you have some incoming, what should I say? Like economic, I can't think of the word now, but you have some people that are fleeing other states that have kind of come in here to set up and enjoy the economy. Yeah. And the first thing they do is try to break it. But
yes, we see that a lot.
You're starting to see a change here, and you could be next. Like, you think you're safe in your town, but I'm going to tell you, there are regions even in deep South Carolina where I'm starting to see more and more people come in because there's job opportunities, there's growth, there's a wonderful, friendly culture there. And so, of course, the first thing they do is they roll in and try to change everything, of not understanding why the culture is the way it is because of independence. So I think if you don't want that to happen, you need to contribute to a larger, at least nationwide zeitgeist. But that's just on me.
No, I completely agree. We have to be involved locally, but we also have to be involved nationally. It's important.
Because we have seen it. It trickles down from state to state.
Exactly.
Or Colorado used to be extremely Republican, like super gun friendly. And then in the last couple of years, now we have like the 15 magazine, you know, capacity ban. The private sales are no longer legal. It has to go through, you know, background checks and stuff. So we've seen that impact.
Yep, we definitely have. Well, we've seen the laws go into place. We saw our House Majority Leader get recalled due to the great work of some citizens. And but yeah, it has gotten a little bit ridiculous. And the weird thing is our state is very, very conservative, except for Boulder, Denver, Fort Collins, just these tiny little pricks of blue that are out there, except, you know, just really clever gerrymandering now has it to where we might lose our state at some point.
Yeah, it's interesting, and this is sort of tangentially related to gun issues, but you see that like there's sort of a nomadic group in the U.S. that will go wherever the job is, and so they'll roll in. If they politically affect the area so that the job no longer exists there, they just go wherever the job went again. They'll just follow it till whenever. And so if you are a local business, if you are invested and have roots in your community, you can be hurt by that as this sort of wave rolls over you, and then it leaves without ever having voted for a long-term solution for anything in that region. And so I think as gun owners, we have to think in those terms and be like, you know, I want to make an investment for my children and my children's children in terms of what their rights should be. And so if you have a chance to push back on the Second Amendment being, infringed, I would say push back on any amendments that are infringed. I mean, there's other things that a lot of gun owners are concerned about that come through the court system as well that feel like infringements on Bill of Rights. So I don't know. It's just one of those things. It's like some people don't have deep roots and they don't worry about this. I think if you have deep roots, you should probably try to branch out to worry about your neighbor.
Yeah. All right. Next story is, I didn't even hear about this, and I wonder why that is, which is the whole reason that I even bring this up. But a female shooter killed after she kills one and injures one in workplace shooting. This happened in Missouri, and basically she was upset about something, Missouri City, I should say. And she was upset about something, posted a video on Facebook that basically said, "Tell my grandma I love her. You know why I'm doing this. Sorry for everything. Didn't want it to end like this. I'm not crazy. This is your fault." And then walked into her place of work and shot some people and ended up being killed by the police. So the reason I even bring it up is I didn't hear about it at all. And I keep, I'm on the internet a lot, so I kind of hear about things like this. And I wonder why it didn't hit that 24-hour news cycle as hard. And I kind of have to wonder, is it just because, and in this article, it never mentions what type of firearm. However, my question to you, and I'll start with you, Tatiana, if it was an AR-15, do you think it would have been all over the place?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's the big, scary object du jour. That's absolutely. I mean, we don't hear a lot of things that hit the news. And there's, in Maine, we've got a lot of edged weapons violence. If we reported every single one of those, you'd hear about it. We don't have a lot of gun violence. We have a lot of edged weapons violence. We have a huge opioid issue. So we got a ton of people that I know that have over the summer months with, the warm weather, they've had a number of home invasions. And I know of 2 families who have been home and have held the would-be attacker at shotgun point until law enforcement arrived. We don't get to hear those positive stories. And if the story doesn't fit the media construct to meet an agenda, we're not going to hear about it.
Yeah, I agree. And so Ava mentioned earlier that this was a female, and we've actually seen a couple more. And I don't know if this is maybe just the zeitgeist, as Othias said, of like media these days, but I've seen a couple of these. We had the lady who walked into YouTube and did some dumb things. Now we've got this. Ava, do you think that we're just seeing this maybe a little bit more because that's what the media is trying to target, because women are such a fast growing portion of the firearms world that now that we're trying to villainize women in mainstream media?
Could be. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're totally guessing.
I think the obvious solution is before the NRA educated women on guns, they were too dumb to murder anybody. And so the NRA has actually turned women into murderers, and they never murdered anybody before the NRA. So we should absolutely take a look at legally dismantling the NRA before it turns all the women into murderers, because guys, they will murder us. They didn't do it for hundreds of years, and now it's on. We're dead. Yeah,
and I'm not a conspiracy theorist. However, it just seems kind of interesting that maybe it's happening a little bit more often. Maybe we're hearing about it more often. I don't know. Ava pointed out that it was a woman, and we saw a couple other, and I just thought it was an interesting kind of path to take.
No, honestly, if you really want, I'll take a stab at it and why it might be that there's a growing sort of women using firearms, because people used to think like women were poisoners or whatever, but women can have murder in their hearts. They can do it just fine too. But the thing is, I think that a lot of these shootings happen because people are loaded full of expectations. They're told, you don't have to do much and you'll be given all these things in life. Mm-hmm. And that tends to be a common theme for a lot of the shooters, is that they did not achieve, or they did not achieve what they thought they should, or they didn't get what they thought they wanted. Like, it's very a selfish thing. You know what I mean? And I think that culturally women were not given a lot of opportunities. And so they don't reach a disappointment level where they start shooting someone. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that they should not be given opportunity. But I am saying that if you overinflate the ego, and that's starting to happen more for women and more for men, we got a lot of young men that are way overinflated on their ego. We're overinflating everybody, male and female. So we're going to see male and female shooters because they're overinflated, and then they think they're like a little lord, and then they get out there and it doesn't work for them, and so they try to go to God mode and start killing people so that they can feel like they're in control again. And so I think it's going to happen with both genders now, because that's the thing we've set people up for.
Interesting. Ladies, any closing thoughts on this article?
Honestly, I don't think that human beings are predatory species. We are an apex predator. And it's just, we have that within our DNA. Where we're failing is intercepting people with the support that they need. And that can be big support, little support, you name it. It can also just be really good parenting. You know, we're creating a culture of people that don't know how to manage their emotions and their stress. And so that release, that explosion of emotion and stress is manifesting in some unfortunate ways that put people at risk, which is also largely why we're seeing a growing number of women carrying concealed and pursuing firearms, because they want it for protection. So the more education we have, I think, surrounding firearms, part of that, especially with concealed carry, is a big conversation about stress management and being able to be present in the moment and being emotionally in control of yourself should things change. And there's education involved with carrying that gun in managing expectations, emotions, and being in control of for your physical being. So if we had more of that, we might see less of the other side of the coin. But, you know, that's part of that great debate.
Definitely. Next story is a little bit of a train wreck coming to us from Ammo Land, but Las Vegas ATF was not allowed to examine weapons used by the killer. So this comes to us from the ATF. Said there are no external visual indications, i.e. automatic sear pinhole, that the weapons have been converted into machine guns. However, on scene ATF personnel were not allowed to physically examine the interior of the weapons for machine gun fire control components or known machine gun conversion devices such as drop-in auto sears, lightning links, etc. This talks about obviously what happened in Las Vegas at the festival. And I just kind of wonder, is this a thing? Like, does the ATF normally examine firearms that are used in crimes? So here's what I think the big thing is. I guess I'll just lead with that. When the ATF was tasked with re-examining how they feel about bump stocks and how they're going to enforce bump stocks and all these different things, they put out a public comment period that lasted a certain amount of time. And then after that public comment period, it goes through, they're going to make their decision. They're going to announce their position on how they're going to look at and treat bump stocks going forward. So the question, I guess, that is raised in this article is, since it was not disclosed before that comment period closed, that now apparently that can't be used against the ATF for lawsuits if they come out against bump stocks, which I guess is kind of interesting. But the whole thing, this article is like a disaster. But I thought it was kind of interesting that they weren't allowed to examine it. But then I started thinking, should they be allowed to examine it? Do they normally examine it? Does anyone have any thoughts on this, or am I just going insane here?
Yeah, I think that there would be a trail for the ATF to follow to be able to examine it. If they, here's the theory. They hear that he uses automatic weapons in the shooting. Somebody says he used an automatic weapon. So the ATF goes, we have no record of a tax stamp for this individual for an automatic weapon. We would like to see if it was an illegal automatic weapon and how it was acquired, because maybe somebody's selling automatic sears that shouldn't be or something. So that would be the grounds for the ATF to have an investigation there. I don't know that that's what happened, but I could see that being the angle the ATF takes. Other than that, I don't know why they would need to see it. Because then that, you know, if there's a possibility of counterfeit money out there, the Treasury wants to see it, even if the crime's not a Treasury crime, right? Mm-hmm. So the ATF, if there's the possibility of an illegal machine gun and it's being provided to, you know, for sale or for acquisition of some sort, then the ATF is going to be motivated to look after that, because they are supposed to prevent the manufacture of illegal machine guns. So that much I would be willing to say, okay, let the ATF take a look at this. Not because they need to come out and decide whether or not, because this man did something, they get to ban or not ban something, but it's only for them to trace down the origin of what is an illegal activity.
And I fully might not be looking at this as intellectually as I should, but it just feels like I don't even know what this article is really about. But I did think it was kind of interesting that they announced that they weren't allowed to look at them. Anyone else have any theories, thoughts, or opinions on this one?
No, I'm kind of like with you. I'm like, do they normally look at
yeah,
it? I guess that's kind of what confuses me.
Yeah.
We're all suffering from the same thing, which is that you said they wouldn't let us, but you haven't said how, not even that, but how you asked. Like, did the ATF show up and say, hey, we'd like to look at that? And they said no? Or did they just sort of like stand in the corner and nobody offered it to them and they were like, well, we didn't get to see it.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like what? I need to know how this happened, or else it doesn't make any sense one way or the other.
I agree. Next story, Austin police kill man running at them with a gun. So, I mean, that headline sounds pretty legit. This happened in Austin near 6th Street. It was a nightclub. There was a bunch of fighting inside a bar. Guy got kicked out of a bar. A bunch of people came out of the bar. Fight ensued. Officers turned a corner after being called in. Guys running towards them with a gun.
8 officers.
Eight officers. And they shoot the guy. I mean, this sounds cut and dry. I guess really the only reason that I wanted to talk about this is A, maybe don't run down an alley with a gun. But B, there's 8 officers. They all shoot except one officer in this cluster of officers that uses a taser. And I just thought that was interesting. So 7 officers shot, 1 officer used a taser. Who was right? Who was wrong?
Actually, because I asked you, I'm like, why did you pick this story?
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I think it's funny that the one guy uses a taser.
Yeah, I was like, when he's in the locker room at the station, he's going to be taking a lot of razzing from his buddies, I think.
But at the end of the day, look at how many cops are getting heat for, pulling out their guns.
Yeah.
Even if they are justified in doing so, they're still.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe that is a symptom. The taser coming out but I don't. Was the guy pointing the gun, or was he just waving it around, or what?
He was running towards them in a dark alley at midnight after a disturbance was called in at a nightclub, and I feel like I'm not saying that they weren't justified. I totally feel
they came around the corner and it's in the air, and they say that he doesn't even have a time to realize they're cops. Okay, we could maybe have a discussion about that, but I don't know the circumstances of the shooting,
and it's impossible for us to know. And
right,
if they felt like they were in danger and they needed to shoot, I stand behind them 100%.
This is definitely a body cam thing that would help. And again, worst case scenarios, they're going to have to review about maybe give it a 2-1000 before, but. That's the furthest argument I could possibly make. I'm usually in support of if you're armed and charging police, there's not really much that could go for you in this situation. It's almost consensual what happens, because you seem to have signed a tacit agreement by your actions by drawing on a police officer that you've pretty much signed it. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like you've committed to this.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody doesn't understand the results of that at this point. I don't think you can say, well, I wasn't informed, so I shouldn't have been shot.
Yeah.
No, you've chosen it. But I do agree. The taser coming out is very interesting.
Yeah.
The other thing is he may have just had it ready. He may have been the taser guy. They may have been like, look, we don't know if the guy's armed yet. We're going to come around this corner in this alley. Hey, Bob, if he's just being a drunk jerk, you get to buzz him. If he's actually got a gun, the other 7 of us are going to lay him out. Which is a weird way to balance that, but that's might have been the call.
You never know.
Tatiana, thoughts on this one? I mean, we talk about police all the time on this show and not second guessing them, because they do have an incredibly difficult and impossible job. And these millisecond decisions that they have to make could be the difference between their life and their death. But yeah, I thought there was a weird juxtaposition between the one guy with the taser and the 7 officers that opened fire.
It never goes smoothly. I mean, it never goes to plan, no matter what you think is going to happen. It just happens. And he may have just grabbed the wrong holster. You can't get in his mind. And I'm always extremely, extremely hesitant to armchair quarterback these types of things, because I mean, even with the body cams and the dash cams, it's very, very hard to understand the full scope of what led up to those moments, the information that they had, circumstances. Armchair quarterbacking these guys, unless they completely broke protocol and we're actually breaking a law, we're violating someone's rights blatantly, which obviously is not as common as people would like to think. I'm always hesitant to do that.
Oh, I will say, while we're talking about this, since we talk about police, you remember body cams were really being pushed, and it was like early technology, and it was expensive. It wasn't necessarily reliable, but they were like, no, we need them because we're going to see how horrible these police officers are. And in some cases, body cam footage has led to the prosecution of police officers. We've had 2 incidents in South Carolina at which both of which should have resulted in riots or some other thing in another state. But what happened is South Carolina saw that they were unjustified shooting by police officers, and they immediately arrested them. Like, they didn't discharge them or anything else. We don't have like this crazy police union. We have a simple police union. And so it's like, when these things happen and it's very clear that the officer is in the wrong, the officers can and will be punished. And people have a lot of confidence in our officers because of that, because they know that there's a message is sent very clearly when you are willing to arrest your own officers when they do these things. Versus, by the way, the states that are supposed to be more sort of progressive about this, like California, where they can just, it's hard to do anything with an officer there because they have a very strong union and they can make a lot of mistakes without necessarily getting in trouble. So I think you can hold officers accountable. It's rare that they actually do what they're accused of doing, though. It's like anything else. There's going to be a bad apple, and you should absolutely shut them down. And the officers will thank you for shut. There was no pushback in South Carolina for these gentlemen because they did something that was very wrong, and it makes the rest of the officers look bad. But the body cams have ultimately, in my mind, been really good, because I've noticed there's whole channels. Have you guys seen like Donut Operator and these other guys that have come out, and they just sit down and watch body cam footage, and some of it even looks bad for the officer at first, but when you have an officer sit there and go, look, this is what's going through his head, and look at how fast this is. Do you really think that you can know better this quickly? This is the situation as it stands in this moment. And honestly, I think it leads a lot of insight. I think in the long run, you're going to see a lot less second guessing of officers when it comes to these things, with educators like that out there, with the footage out there, to be able to say, from the officer's perspective, look at how horrible this is. Like, it's not as simple as you think.
Definitely. Next story is a tragic one, in my opinion. And I want our instructors to kind of talk about this one first. Ohio man shoots and kills his granddaughter that knocked on his window. 19-year-old girl got locked out, tried to come home around 11 p.m., knocked on her grandfather's window to get his attention so he could let her in. And he shot through the window. She ended up being taken to the hospital and dying. Ava, I'll start with you.
Well, I mean, we hear about this more often than we should. And, you know, like a teenager sneaks out, they're sneaking back in, their parent confuses them for an intruder, and they shoot the child. And that's why I think it's important. I mean, you know, just like deadly force, obviously, you know, if you were to shoot somebody through the door or something, somebody could argue you weren't really in danger. I guess I understand because of his age. The guy was like, what, 72?
72, yeah.
I don't know. This is tough. But like, I know in Colorado, like in order to use deadly force with the Castle Doctrine, you can't just shoot anybody that walks into your house. You have to have reason to believe that they have committed or plan to commit a crime aside from unlawfully entering your home. And the reason why they put this law in place is because there were people that were just shooting at anything that moved in the middle of the night, you know, slightest sound. And they were killing people like family members or their drunken neighbor who confused their house for yours or, you know, whatever. So it was causing a lot of innocent people to die. I don't know.
I think a lot of this goes back to know your target. Like, yeah. I feel like it seems like it's that simple to me. I'm like, I get that somebody's coming through your window,
but I feel bad because this guy is old, so he's probably, you know, who knows what kind of condition he's in, but he's probably not like physically capable of taking on anyone. So he's
I understand the fear, I understand the anxiety, I understand wanting to shoot somebody that's climbing through your window. And I understand shooting them once they enter your window and you go, yeah, I don't know this person.
Absolutely.
And, you know, like I get like all that I'm fine with. But my problem is you have family members, you have other people in your community, you have drunks. You know what I mean? Like I've had my own brother had a drunk wander into a townhouse that he was living in. And he's like, you know, his 3-year-old at the time is going, there's a man in the house. And he goes downstairs and here's the thing. He knew it wasn't a normal break-in because he was in the bathroom peeing. So he had his handgun at low ready, and the guy comes out and is very alarmed to see that the man has a handgun. He's like, I think you're in the wrong house. I know there's a party going on 3 doors down. Maybe you should go that way. Yeah. And, you know, and it's like, it's discretion. It's identifying the threat. You don't just shoot because somebody's in, like you go to the bathroom door. I hear you, strange man. Bang, bang, bang. That's not the way to handle your firearm. Know your target. I understand that there's some hesitancy there. It's like, it's dark. There's a person in here. You want to stop them as soon as possible. Yeah. You do not know the intent. And the intent is to break your window, apparently, or knock on your window. Not even break it. She wasn't breaking the window. She's knocking
on the window. Yeah.
That's not like, let the glass break first for something, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Tatiana?
You know, this goes back to that argument of, are weapons mounted lights viable? The answer is yes, they are, especially for home defense. If you can't see it and positively identify it, you have no business touching the trigger. That's a thing, but these are learned skills, and people are taught to be afraid. If you're in a vulnerable place, that fear gets magnified. And so people are very reactionary with their firearms as opposed to being proactive and going and learning beyond just shooting concentric black and white circles on a piece of paper. And if you're planning on using a firearm for home defense, it's time to start training with some people who can teach you how to make really good decisions under duress and when you're afraid. It's very easy to get comfy and complacent at the range because it's very familiar. Then you go home. Have you even considered what those 4 firearm safety rules mean and look like in your house? Most people don't. Tonight I taught a class of 6 adults. 2 of them were young adults, just 19 and 18 years old. And, you know, it was a 2-hour class on gun safety. and we teach firearms safety in the context of the range while simultaneously giving them that visualization of what those rules mean when they go home. And that's that break that we unfortunately create with a lot of training at the range. We need to start bringing that knowledge base back home.
Yeah.
I'd agree strongly in training too. I think it's absolutely a responsibility that goes with your right. Yeah, and I know you can't enforce it legally, but like, I mean, people do, but even for concealed carry training, you know, they don't really test on threat or non-threat targets. And when people sit there and they game their safety out, you know, they think, okay, I've had this gun, and if somebody attacks me like this, I'm going to do that. It's going to be that. And the thing is, like, how many times do you ever think, like, how many times have you ever sat down and pictured, all right, somebody's breaking into my house, and it turns out they're not a threat at all? Has anybody sat down and imagined that scenario, like, realistically? Because that is ultimately more likely than you getting murdered.
Yeah. I mean,
so when you do training that has like threat or non-threat to it, you are experiencing that. You are identifying the target.
I have two close friends that in two different parts of Colorado, both of them have had a drunk person wander into their home in the middle of the night.
Oh, absolutely.
And neither one of them shot anybody. So this case actually kind of makes me angry, and I'm angry at the old man, even though I'm very sympathetic for him and I can't even imagine what he's going through. It's laws like this that make us end up with what Ava talked about, with this, how we have to gauge intent. We have the castle doctrine. Someone comes into our home, they're 100% in our home, and now we have to suspect that they have the intent to commit a crime. Like, how do we gauge the intent of a stranger, of a person that we don't know, of someone who's in our house when they shouldn't be in our house, before we can use deadly force against them? It's stupid cases like this that end up with stupid laws that require us as concealed carriers, that require us as people who take it seriously and do get training, to now gauge the intent of a person who may or may not be a criminal.
And in the end, cause us to have a lot of legal issues afterwards.
To be fair, I think firing through the window when somebody's knocking on it is clear negligence.
It's
like
100%.
Not, that is not defense.
And he's been charged with homicide.
Yeah, I would say so.
I still feel bad for him, though.
Yeah, I do too. I completely do. But it is cases like this.
I feel bad for the family, but honestly, like, and I'm being very judgy, and I should not be, but dealing with a lot of older men, because I work with collectibles and things like that, there's a certain type that does not want to hear sensibility with firearms. And they're thankfully a dying generation. There were a lot of them for a long time, and they're sort of fading off as training and education become much more paramount due to, I don't know, networks like these and online outreach and things like that. But I'm not saying that I won't feel sympathetic if it turns out he's not that type, but I just sort of lean towards, I think I know this sort of man, you know?
Yeah.
I think we both, like, does anybody not picture a 1911 in this scenario? Like, I'm not trying to be like
1911s. All right. Be nice. Could have been a wheel gun. Could have been.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah,
right?
It could have been the Smith and Wesson K frame or something, but I'm going to say, I mean, it's like,
I actually pictured a High Point 380 because I was thinking, you know, fixed income, 72 years old.
No, this thing's like got dust all up in. Okay, we should not be going down this route. I'm thinking we're.
Well, no, because I was thinking like fixed income, granddaughter living with him, probably not a whole lot of money. High Point 380. That's going to be like a something that's affordable, unless he's had it for a long time.
I was thinking he'd have a gun that was like ancient, and it was probably, you know, a revolver.
All right, speculation. Next story, guns.com. 8 anti-gun bills advance in California legislature. I want to go through these just quickly. These are the bills. Makes it a lifetime firearm prohibition for those who have been admitted to a mental health facility under certain conditions more than once in a 1-year period. Would study crafting a law to allow individuals to voluntarily give up their own gun rights. Adds more red tape to applying for concealed carry permits in the state, making firearm safety course of at least 8 hours mandatory before they could be issued a license. Expand who can file for one of California's gun violence restraining orders. Right now it's family. This would add coworkers, employers, school employees. Would prohibit the sale of firearms and ammunition at the state-owned Cow Palace, which they have gun shows there, so that would just basically stop gun shows from being there. Would bar firearm sales to those under 21 years of age. Would ration new firearms purchases to 1 every 30 days. And would make African hunting illegal by banning the importation to the state of animals legally harvested on the African continent.
Yeah, that last one, I was like, are you kidding me?
Hey, that wouldn't make it illegal. It would just make it really wasteful.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Yeah,
they would take all the conservation out of hunting in Africa.
Shawn, I shake my head. So Earlier this year, I was invited out to give the keynote address at the San Diego County Gun Owners Association annual gala. And I was able to participate in that event, meet a lot of amazing people, have some great conversations, and, commiserate with this group of 800 people that were present on, what we're facing. And the fact that it is an ever evolving, let's pick a nuance in order to attack legislatively in that state. It is an incessant, relentless attack. And I think it seems so obscure and bizarre to us to find a minutia and make a law about it, but that is how they are going to lose their rights. And that is how they're going to influence these people who want to eliminate firearms, which, let's just face it, it is not a reality in this country. It's not going to happen. There's too many of them. And there's too many of us that are good gun owners to let that happen. But the state can shut it down and make it so prohibitive that they turn their law-abiding citizens into criminals overnight. And that's how they get to win this. The problem with this type of stuff is we're legislating based on technologies and practices that don't yet exist and yet are being turned into law, like microstamping every single component of a firearm down to the grip screws. And somehow that is now a registerable firearm as a grip screw. That was something that was up for debate while I was in town last in San Diego. So, I mean, it's the big conversation about this is, it seems so bizarre, but this is the reality that people in San Diego are living with. This is the bizarreness. It just seems rational.
So crazy. Yeah, California, I gotta say, I'm worried for you. All of those that I just read that I mentioned, they all moved to the next level.
Every time I hear about California law, I picture just like a giant HOA.
Right.
Like it's that petty. Like, just stuff where you're like, you can be like, oh, Kathy wrote that. I know it was Kathy. Like, you just, you know what I mean? Like, you just know there's like that one person who's pissed at that one other person, and that's where it came from. Like, it's just so petty.
Yeah, I know. It's awful, man. I am very firm in don't leave the place you love just because of stupid legislation. Fight for your rights. There's a lot of gun owners in California, tons of them. In fact, on the Firearms Radio Network and all the shows that I'm on, California is always top 3 for listeners, which I know you guys are out there, and I'm sorry.
Oh, they're listening because they can't talk to their neighbors.
Yeah,
exactly.
That's like they're tuning. Like, I can't get anybody where I'm at in South Carolina. I never get recognized, like, ever. And then I leave the state, and it's instantly, hey, you're that guy. But in South Carolina, they talk about guns with each other. They don't go online to talk about guns.
Yeah.
Why would you search for a gun? You could just wander over to the shop.
Yeah.
And talk. We go anywhere in the state, and our ammo guy works at one of the nicer gun shops in our city. We go anywhere in the state, and people are like, don't you work over at whatever? I love going down there when I'm down there. You know what I mean? And then me, that's like, nope, no clue. And it's much more local there. So I feel like, yes, of course you're getting listeners there because they're desperate to have a connection to the community. So we hear you. We're very sorry.
Yeah.
At least you still have Tauf Ledermaus. He lives there.
That's true. That's true. And we actually talked to a bunch of people. We were there for the Brownells convoy, and they were that. They were like, oh, I can't really talk about guns with
remember, we were wearing like gun shirts, hats, and they were like, hey, look, we don't want anything bad to happen to you guys. You should probably like change your shirt.
Yeah, that was an Uber driver in San Francisco.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, because he kept asking us. He's like, what do you guys do for a living? We're like, we're a media. And he's like, really, what kind? And it's like, all right, whatever. So we told him we were in the firearm industry, and he's like, look, that's cool. I really like you guys, but don't tell anybody else that you do that. I don't want you guys to run into any trouble. Yeah. I'm like, what kind of trouble are we going to run into?
They're not armed.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, what are you going to do? Poop on me? No, thanks, bro.
Stab me with your needle?
They're going to look at you shamefully.
Okay, well,
and then
hey, it happens.
Whine, and then they're going to pass a law.
Yeah, my mom's been doing that my whole life. I'm ready for it. All right, let's move on to our full auto news segment. This is kind of just stuff that the real media won't talk about. Usually some of the crazier stuff here. And we all pick a story. So Tatiana, if you want to look in that section of the show notes and pick a story while I talk about mine, that would be perfect. So mine is irate woman with high point is taken into custody. And here's the thing.
Of course you chose the high point.
If it's got a high point in the story, I want to talk about it. That's just who I am. I don't know why high point was actually mentioned in the article. This comes to us from the GJ Sentinel. A woman narrowly averted the use of deadly force by sheriff's deputies who tried to arrest her. Basically, she was getting evicted. She was wearing a high point on her hip, open carry. The sheriff's department showed up to do what they do and evict her, and she got very confrontational with them. And she dropped the gun, and they were able to get in there and stop it without anything bad happening. But the firearm recovered at the scene, a black High-Point model CF380, had a single round chambered, and the magazine with 7 other rounds was also allegedly recovered.
I want to see the holster. That's like the first thing that came to my
Uncle
mind.
Mike's, without question.
I know. I was like,
I mean,
of course it was open carry.
Like an open carry High-Point is just, oh man.
I know somebody else who does that.
Those are people with no shame.
I know, no shame.
All right.
I pick, but the things go bang every time. Like, you got to give them credit. They're beating Taurus on a lot of models.
Yeah.
Like, it's weird, but it's like, hey, you get only like one shot. It's going to be a Taurus or a High-Point.
Look, I'm not a High-Point fan, but I feel like they've got a bad rap.
Okay, whatever. Hashtag fanboy.
All right, Ava, what was your story?
All right, so the story I got a kick out of was the woman who screams, "I will kill you" at Planet Fitness. I picked this because, Shawn, we're familiar with Planet Fitness.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get us wrong. We don't really work out.
We have memberships.
We have memberships. We haven't been there in months.
Yeah.
But we're familiar with, the layout. No grunting, no judging. They have purple Tootsie Rolls. And so it's kind of, it's cool. I don't feel judged when I go there. Well, I don't know what happened to this lady, but she basically goes crazy. And the guy at the counter, she's like pulling like computers off the table, throwing it at him. She's wearing a nightgown. She comes in, I guess, wearing a red robe. It doesn't show that in the video, but underneath she's wearing a nightgown and some slippers. So I don't really think she was working out to begin with, but apparently they were arguing over the Tootsie Rolls. Like maybe they ran out of purple and they only had the regular chocolate.
I feel like this is a person who did not have a membership, who did not want to exercise, who just wanted a late night snack. He probably said, "Could you please stop taking handfuls of Tootsie Rolls, you crazy woman?" And apparently that
could have. And then maybe she got mad because she's like, "You're judging me." And then they had to, she wanted to ring the bell, and he's like, "Lady, we're not going to ring the bell."
She is.
And then,
so mad.
Since we're making out the story, this is also like, it's like, they used to be neighbors, and they kissed one night, and then it's just been awkward ever since. And she keeps coming in and making eye contact while taking the Tootsie Rolls. I'm making it up, but this is a better story already.
I think
so I'm gonna keep going.
Yeah, no, I like Tatiana, Planet Fitness fan or no?
Oh man, I'm not a member. I don't know. I lift things up and put things down, but it's not at a gym. So.
I just figured that I'd lose weight by having a membership,
Yeah.
but that's not really how it works.
I lift things up and put them down too, but they're called cheeseburgers, and I don't think it's helping.
I have one like literally like a few blocks from me, and I have a membership there just so that I can like not when it's raining out, I can just go there and use it. It's so basically like I don't have room for a treadmill in my house, and there's treadmills there. And that's sort of like all I really need, but it's also so cheap it's cheaper than having a treadmill. So why not?
I don't know, but look, I'm looking at you. I think you need more than a treadmill.
This is me maintaining. It gets much worse if I don't do work.
I love it. Tatiana, what story did you pick?
All right, so I've got the Decatur mom threatened with gun after confronting daughter's boyfriend, police say.
Okay.
So the long and short of this story is this mother has a 22-year-old daughter and a 17-year-old son. The daughter has expressed to the mother that the boyfriend's been rough with her. So the mother takes the 17-year-old, drives to the boyfriend's house and confronts the boyfriend. It gets aggressive, and the boyfriend and brother start attacking the 17-year-old son. It escalates to nasty words and exchanges of punches. And finally, the brother of the boyfriend gives the boyfriend a gun, who threatens the mother, who then goes to the car, gets a stick, comes back to attack the boyfriend. This is just like a hot mess here.
Yeah. Like, sounds like Jerry Springer.
I mean, why? There's a gun in play. Why would you come back? And at one point, the boyfriend expressed to the mother that he was going to kill her. At which point then she goes and gets a stick out of her truck to defend herself, with the boyfriend repeatedly racked the slide back on the semi-automatic gun and kept threatening her. That's the quote from the article. Why? I mean, one, why go to an already aggressive person as a mom and make it worse? You're not going to solve anything. Why bring a kid, a minor, to a confrontation? I mean, this is just a mess, and everything compounded by bad decision.
It says so much about like just avoidance of these situations. Just ends up with this stuff not happening. Like just avoid. I avoid all conflict at all times.
It's interesting, but it's just emotionally charged. There's not any. It is obvious that there is no thought to what the outcome should be from either party. Like they're just like, I'm mad because of the treatment of my daughter, which is fair, I suppose. But then,
well, like that I could understand.
Instead of going, but instead of being like, all right, so now I need to make sure she is safe, I will involve the police, or I will have a restraining order, or I will do this or that. It's, oh no, now I'm going to sort this out, and then I'm just going to keep yelling, and when it goes off the rails, I'm going to yell and wave a stick around, because obviously at some point my yelling and making a scene is going to make this better. Like I don't understand, like. These are people that are not looking for solutions as much as they are looking for an outlet.
Yeah. I mean, the story goes to end with the boyfriend's brother continued to try to fight the son while the boyfriend is, threatening the mother with a firearm. And then the mother is able to get into the car. And when she's able to finally, quote unquote, when the son fell into the passenger seat of her car, she was able to drive away. The daughter, by the way, wasn't present for any of this. So there was no immediate threat to her child. She brought a child to a fight. And
I have one traumatized child. I will go solve this problem by taking and traumatizing the other child so that they're at least evenly traumatized.
This is, quote, air quotes, bad parenting. This is not how that's supposed to go.
Yep, I agree. All right, crazy stuff. That'll do it for our stories tonight. I just want to catch up with you guys real quick. Othias, you're in Colorado. I know you're super excited about the reciprocity. He's only here for a short period of time. I know. He drove here just to be on the show, and now he's driving back.
Yeah, I'll just leave now.
Yeah. So tell us what you've been up to and where people can find all of that online.
Well, I have an online history series called Primer, and what we're doing is going through World War I gun by gun, and we are telling the story of each individual gun in a very long format, so like half an hour to even an hour and a half for some of the really big ones. And when we do that, we often shake out a lot of opinions that the militaries of those regions had, a lot of their economic situations, a lot of their resources. Like it's interesting how you find out a lot about alliances and resources and money and talent and just all sorts of things about a country just by what rifle they chose. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of things that we also take for granted is that people look at a 1911, it's kind of a meme that it's like it's outlived its usefulness. But there was also a 1911 looks like a modern gun. Look at any other handgun from 1911, they don't look like that. They look completely wild, like space rays and things like that. But you got to understand, in 1911, they all looked perfectly reasonable. You had no way of knowing that this Colt gun was going to be the standard for the shape of the handgun going forward. And the only way that you find that out is through a conflict, and then it is just clearly superior for a while. And then, so it's all an evolutionary process. So I invite people to look because you learn a lot about the trial and error of what has become the modern firearm.
Love it, man. And I think you also have tried to make yourself the most ungoogleable content creator in the whole gun universe, right?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Because you named it Primer, which is, used for so many other things, and C and Arsenal, like no one knows how to spell that.
At this point, you can Google just any World War I firearm that you happen to love.
And you pop up?
And I pop up. Well, maybe not. We haven't done the 1911 yet. I shouldn't have used that example.
Oh, yeah, that's.
We are saving that one. People who have watched the show learn that the longer I wait to do an episode, the more I'm going to bring to the episode. So the reason I might not have a 1911 is because I might be trying to get other trials pistols to see how far I could unreasonably push this. This is a man who has turned out and shot a Pedersen device on air. So I will root for every iteration of what led up to the 1911 and put it on range if I can. So that's why, for the people who complain it hasn't been done yet, you don't want me to have done it. That you want me to have a ton of money and time, and for me to go nuts on it. That's what you want.
Love it, man. Thanks for coming out. Appreciate you being on the show. Huh? And just Google Primer, and you will find it.
Just don't worry about it. Don't even look for me. It doesn't. I don't need you.
Jeez. Perfect. Tatiana, tell us what you've been up to and where people can find you online.
Sure. I made it really complicated. My website is my name, TatianaWhitlock.com. I am hopefully more Googleable.
Right.
By design.
To me, but Shawn got it wrong twice.
I know. You gotta, Google how to spell my name and then give it a go. That's where we gotta go with it.
It was the Whitlock part that just had me so confused.
I know. It's an odd mix. I know. And I'm neither Slavic origin nor Scottish, so it's one of those misleading experiences there. But yes, TatianaWhitlock.com. It's my name on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And lately, it's been a lot of getting ready for 2019. That's kind of the big push right now. Believe it or not, us trainers are booking out next year already. And, we're wrapping those up, locking in the venues, adding new curriculum, bringing in new programs, working with some of the instructors that are out there that I absolutely love and respect, and building new things. And that's the best part. That's where we get to create and do the fun stuff. So all of that's been really cool. All the stuff with Gap Marketing is phenomenal. We keep doing amazing things really quietly behind the scenes to make companies do awesome stuff despite the hostile environment that we live in as far as media and advertising goes. So we're getting really creative in that environment too. And the results are phenomenal, which makes me really happy. And then there's awesome stuff brewing with Trigger Time TV. And then, sharing the love with my sponsors. There's Nighthawk, Agency Arms, Mean Gene Leather, Tough Products. So those guys get a head nod and a tip of the hat. And of course, probably one of the coolest things I'm able to do within the community right now is the work that I'm doing with A Girl and a Gun, because that is probably do the most good, reach the most people efforts. And that gets us out in front of thousands of women across the country. It's actually now the fastest growing women's organization in the nation. And they're doing amazing stuff. We have been getting more women through the Stop the Bleed program as one of the initiatives this year, which is just leading to more really responsible firearms owners. So kudos to all of these women who are putting in the time and effort and investing in themselves, which I wish I'd see more of us gun owners do as a whole. So good stuff, lots of fun. I'm really looking forward to 2019.
I'd be very proud of that work, by the way. If you're even remotely curious about it, don't forget that women have traditionally been like the primary victims of violence. So women getting into self-defense is an extremely strong solution to a very long-standing problem.
Yeah, completely agree. Thank you so much, Tatiana, for being here with us. Appreciate it, and can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me on. It was fun.
Ava, what have you been up to?
Just always staying busy. Instructing. I own Elite Firearms and Training and teach full time. And then I'm also busy with the podcast called Gun Funny, which you host with me.
I do.
And that keeps us on our toes.
It does. It's a lot of work.
It is. Yeah. Podcasts seem like we make it look easy, but they're not.
I don't think we make it look easy.
So yeah, that's what I've been busy with.
Very cool. And where can people find you online?
So you can find me at elitefirearmsandtraining.com or gunfunny.com.
All right. Awesome. And, that'll do it for the show. Thanks to our panelists. Thanks to everyone who watched, listened, and commented. Go ahead and subscribe to us. Check out our advertisers, Patriot Patch Company and Manticore Arms at manticorearms.com and patriotpatch.co. Hope to see you at the Bullpup Shoot. And as I always say, This Week in Guns is produced by Kenny Ortega and is a production of the Firearms Radio Network. I'll see you next week. Everyone dance.
I'm actually getting busy.